Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It is the Monday show with me, Andrew Musgrove, and our Newcastle United editor, Aaron Stokes. An absolute privilege to be with you once again. And on the back of a famous win up at St James's Park, Newcastle United defeating Manchester United 2-0 in what was a tremendous game. Aaron, after that result and just in general, how are you doing?
Yeah, you know what it is? I was walking home last night from James Park and I thought, it's really excited to do the podcast tomorrow. I love doing it when we've got a win to talk about. None of this doom and gloom, none of this slagging the players. Amazing day yesterday, start to finish. And I was saying to you, earlier in the office, everybody I spoke to last week was like, we're going to beat them, we're going to beat them. And I didn't really feel it until before kick-off. And then obviously I started to think, yeah, they could do this, Just such a good day.
Yeah, I always had faith they could do it. I was feeling confident, and then after we spoke to Dan from Manchester Evening News, I was feeling even more confident. But I want to start with something that he said on the View from the Opposition podcast, because after speaking to him about Scott McTominay, my view from earlier in the week where I said he'd be an excellent signing for Newcastle kind of was eroded away. We know a lot of you guys listening and watching didn't agree with me now and when we talked up Scott McTominay. If yesterday, Aaron, was an audition for Scott McTominay to move to Newcastle United, it wasn't a very good one, and it was tremendous to see Sean Longstaff really put in a shift yesterday. If you're looking for a man of the match, he was definitely in the conversation.
Yeah, 100%. I think Longstaff and Willock and Bruno both had, really, really good games. McTominay just from the first minute just looked off it. Maybe it was the pressure of the audition, knowing that you had to impress. And I mean, Longstaff's definitely been listening to the podcast where we've been saying that he's not as good as McTominay, because he was really, really good, really sharp from minute one. And yeah, look, I know we're sat here this time last week saying we wouldn't mind McTominay, but I don't think he's won anybody over after yesterday.
It was a complete performance there, as Graham said. That first half was really, really something special. They were just lacking the goals. And I guess the Newcastle of old, you would be fearing Manchester United after having a telling off at half time. The dressing room would come out and just totally change the game. But there was nothing special about that Manchester United performance yesterday. Newcastle United, the better side throughout, and the fear that was maybe with some during the halftime interval did not become a reality. Thankfully, Newcastle got the goal through Joe Willock, then another through Callum Wilson. Were you always confident, Aaron, that the goals would come? Because, after watching the first half, Willock missing two sitters, some good saves from David De Gea. Then in the second half, again, some good saves, one off the woodwork. Were you always confident that the goal would come?
No, to be completely honest. I think, if I'm being brutally honest, I sat there at halftime thinking, we've seen this film before. We saw it in the Carabao Cup final. We saw it against Liverpool. Lots of chances, not taking them, not being clinical, and it comes back to bite them. I was a little bit more confident when the second half started, and actually Newcastle, just picked up from where they left off. Really, still on the front foot. Man United just not having a sniff up top. But yeah, I think, first half and half time, I was sat there thinking, I really hope this isn't, history repeating itself with Newcastle being really, really wasteful, because, I mean, they really were. And then obviously it then coming back to bite them.
I mean, the first half was just special.
It was chaotic, wasn't it? It was
and
just,
the way they were hitting Manchester United on the counter, on the speed, was Man United could not handle them, and they should have gone in really 2 or 3 goals up. And now obviously they've won the game. We can talk about how good that first half performance was. I don't think we could be sitting here in such good spirits. Obviously, had the goals not come in the second half. But if I asked you to pick out a top performer from that first half, you could list 3 or 4, 5 names.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Alisson Maximin had a really slow start the game, and he was trying to cut inside, and he was maybe looking a little bit predictable. But once he started actually taking it onto his left, actually just trying to get the crosses in rather than cutting back on side, I thought he was, really, really good. Obviously, nearly got that assist for Willock in the first half. Willock as well. I know he missed 2 chances, but he was getting in the right positions. Murphy and Trippier and Longstaff, all three of them very direct on the right. And also, Sven Botman at the back. There was a couple of times, and Dan Burn as well, especially in the first half. He made Anthony's life so tough. And then actually Rashford got swapped over at the right, and he didn't have a sniff either. So, as you say, 5, 6, 7 players in that first half alone, you look at and think, Yeah, really, really good performances.
Roger says the first 30 minutes was superb football. I feared that couldn't have been kept up for the duration, but it didn't drop by much. And you mentioned there, Dan Burn, you felt it was a big kind of opening 20 minutes for him because he's up against Anthony. We know what a tricky player Anthony is. And really, there was probably only once that Anthony got the better of him. It was a little kind of back heel through the legs of Dan Burn. But that was more because Dan Burn kind of jumped in. I think when Dan Burn kind of worked how to defend against Anthony, I just don't dive in. He wants you to come at him. If you sit back and make him come towards you, he's not really that good at working his magic from that angle. And like you say, he kept Anthony quiet. And there was a moment he got a good challenge in. The crowd got behind him. I felt the crowd was really important for Dan Burn. Yes, not just for Dan Burn, but I thought particularly for Dan Burn. Just cheering on those challenges, cheering on those clearances. When really, I don't think Dan Burn would have been naive to the fact that maybe Manchester United would have targeted him as the weak link.
Absolutely. I think, Rashford really struggled in the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and Ten Hag said, right, we'll come and have a go at Burn. And one thing I will say is that I love the fact that you're so close to the pitch when you're in the Newcastle press box, because you get to hear and see a lot of things. And Dan Burn, being closest to us, looked for the first 20 minutes like he was absolutely blowing. Every time Anthony or Rashford got the ball, he was making these grimacing faces like, I really don't want to chase this player, but I'm going to have to. But he just, as you say, there was maybe once or twice he got caught out, but that tackle to stop Rashford breaking down the right, as you say, got a huge, amazing defensive work. I thought he was really, really good yesterday. And he also was the last couple of games, and everybody's been calling for Target and saying it's time to move to, Burn either back to centre back or out the team. He's really, really stepped up when he needed to.
Yeah, and it's great to see that across the pitch. We mentioned their Longstaff stepping up, Murphy's taking his opportunity. It's really good to see St. Maxim yesterday taking his opportunity. Obviously, I mean, the big debate about Maxi playing is whether you sacrifice some defensive kind of capabilities to play him. I think yesterday we saw another element of this debate, because there were times yesterday when he didn't track back and Dan Burn was exposed. Thankfully, didn't come to any. And there were times yesterday when Joe Willock was telling them, "Come on, you've got to get back into position."
And Eddie Howe a lot of times, yeah.
But on the flip side, and this is what I always come to, is that if you make that sacrifice defensively, you need him to do it offensively. And yesterday, he did exactly that. It's frustrating because it's not on a consistent basis. Against West Ham, he'll probably have an absolute shock every start. But yesterday was another, this is what Maxim can do. It always tends to be against the big sides, but just reaffirms it. If you're sacrificing that defensive capability, if he performs going forward, then it's not too big of a risk, I guess.
Yeah, and it's something we were talking about off air. And it's about, if you knew you could guarantee those performances from Maxi, those type of showings, twice a month, you would take it, because he's just unplayable on his day. But then you just know, as you say, that he just can't do it on a consistent basis. But as you say, his three best performances this season: Manchester City at home, Liverpool at home, Manchester United at home. He loves those games. I mean, he had Dallo on toast yesterday throughout. And look, 6 or 7 players now fighting for 2 spots down the left, down the right. And Murphy and Maxi are doing very, very well to keep Gordon, Anderson, Jolan and Miggy out the team. But they need to do it, consistently.
Of course, you mentioned Miggy there. I've just put Joe's comment. Joe's back in. He's a big Miggy fan. He says, "Who said 2-0 in the Champions League? Here we come." I think Joe's referring to his own score prediction last week. But there was a picture of Miggy in his box on Sunday. All smiles, and it was great to see. He's always smiling. It was a nice moment to see. But you're right there. There are so many players fighting for those positions. We saw glimpses from Anthony Gordon. He was physical in the challenge. He took the ball forward when Newcastle, relieved pressure. It was a lovely moment when he was right down that wing. He had to chase it down, didn't he? And he anticipated the defender making a bit of a whoopsie with it. He did, gets into the box, and it's a lovely little ball across the box. Couldn't do much else with it. And Man United clear. So we're seeing glimpses of Anthony Gordon. I'm really excited to see him get a run in the team, but by God, he's going to have a hard job getting into it, isn't he?
Yeah, well, it was a question Eddie Howe was asked after about, the options he's got in those positions. And he basically said, in vintage how fashion, that all these players are one game away from losing their spot, really, because there's so much competition. And it was something that I noticed before the game on Sunday. That bench now is looking so strong. Yesterday, Wilson, Gordon, Joelinton, Anderson, all able to come on and change the game. If you go back 3-4 months when they were suffering with injuries and Isaac and Maxi were out, and Joelinton was out, that bench looked. I mean, go back to that Sheffield game. You changed the team and it was just different. Now he's got so many options. But yeah, look, if you're Joelinton, if you're Miggy when you're back fit, if you're Wilson, you've got a real job in your hands getting back in this team now, which is what you want.
Oh, 100%. It means, the training's going to be really interesting, isn't it? Because you're going to have these players having to give their all to work their way in, because we know Howe doesn't necessarily like to change a winning side. I think, and you can correct us if I'm wrong, Aaron, but I certainly expected Joelinton to start yesterday.
At 100%. I mean, there was a few sort of whispers before kickoff that he was going to be dropped, and I thought, no, surely not. He was the one certainly you thought was going to come straight back in because of how good he's been. You thought yesterday with no Casemiro, that would have been the perfect game for him to dominate the middle. But fair play to Howe for sticking to his guns. He doesn't like to change a winning team. Sometimes that goes against him. Yesterday, he got it absolutely spot on.
Man United was so bad.
They were.
It was so bad.
For as good as Newcastle were, and Newcastle were really good, taking off in the way, but Manchester United,
pedestrian.
It just goes to show, doesn't it, that the Carabao Cup final came at the wrong time. Because if that game had been played in December, or that game had been played this weekend, I think Newcastle would have had a real chance of beating a Manchester United team that were just going through a really good moment.
The thing is, I'm going to just show. I agree, but they had a real chance of beating them at Wembley. They just didn't manage to step it up. But there were loads of elements that came into play. The form was shocking. Casemiro was the big difference, isn't he? That game yesterday, not saying Newcastle wouldn't have won, but it would have been a lot harder with Casemiro. And you could probably argue a fully fit Marcus Rashford, who, by the way, if he's not made it back to Manchester, someone give Kieran Trippier a ring, because he may well still be in his pocket, because Trippier just did not let him have a sniff, did he?
No, he didn't. And the first 10-15 minutes, as I mentioned, Rashford was trying. He was getting a bit frustrated. Fantastic moment yesterday when he threw his boot off the ground. I love that they're just rattling these teams now. But yeah, I was speaking to a mate of mine who works at Man United before the game, and we're sort of talking about what we thought was going to happen. And he said Rashford will be, anonymous for 80 minutes, but then he just turns up. And as the game went on and it was still 0-0, I was just thinking, is this going to come true? And is Rashford just going to steal an inch? But fair play to Trippier. He had him all over yesterday.
What did you make of Ten Hag's substitutions? They're a bit of a strange one, didn't he? He took off two centre backs and replaced them with two centre backs, and then brought Fred on, defensive midfielder, forward defensive midfielder. It was very bizarre.
Yeah, it looked a bit all over the shop, and there was a lot of changes at once as well when they're defending a corner. He brought Palestri on, the young'un as well, who hasn't really had much game time. He was asked about it after the game, and he sort of tried to justify it by saying he felt it was the right call. But yeah, really weird. But also on that note, we haven't mentioned it yet, but Eddie Howe was asked after the game about, he was going to bring three subs on at once: Gordon, Joelinton, and Wilson, and then Isaac was going to come off, and then Newcastle went and scored, so he parked the subs. And it was a really good answer from Howe, because he said sometimes you just need to let the players on the pitch know that they could be coming off you. So it's just a little bit of a
It's funny you should mention that, because I've got a clip from Eddie Howe's press conference, and it might just be the one you're talking about. Let me just play it now.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, when you enter the football pitch, you want your players to give their all. I say that regularly when I'm sat here, and it's the first thing you look for. Are your team committed? I felt we were. I think mentally we were in a good place. We attacked the game. We wanted the ball in play. We wanted a high intensity game. We wanted a quick game, and delighted with the product.
How big a moment is it to take on Manchester United and beat them? There's 22 shots to 6. How big a moment is that for the club?
Well, hopefully it further builds our confidence levels that we can beat anybody, home or away. That's the mentality that we need. We know it's only a small step. We know there's big games to come, so we're not getting carried away, but we'll enjoy tonight.
And finally, a word on the relentless energy of your two English midfielders, Sean Longstaff and Joe Willock, who just never stop.
Terrific. I thought all three midfielders with Bruno as well were terrific today. Yeah, Sean goes under the radar for me in terms of getting the recognition his performances deserve. I thought he was really, really good today. Joe will get the headlines because of his goal, but I think his performances have been steadily improving the last few weeks, so really pleased with both those players.
George, just ahead of that first goal, you were about to make 3 substitutions, weren't you? They were all stripped. Why didn't you make them just before that goal kick?
Well, sometimes you like to leave them there to just give the players that are on the pitch what's the right word? I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe a little nudge just to say you could be coming off, so buck your ideas up. So sometimes I like to leave that, a little bit in doubt. I'm not saying that's why we scored, but I was mulling over what I was going to do, just give myself a little bit more thinking time.
And was Alexander going to come off at that? Because Callum was on.
No comment.
Because he then pressed from that short goal kick, and then that was really the moment.
I think the beauty of the squad when we have everybody fit, so we've got everyone fit at the moment bar Miggy, we have a lot of options, a lot of strength. Although we don't have huge numbers, the players we do have are all good players.
I think the phrase Eddie Howe was looking for there was kick up the arse. I think is what he would have said if he was in maybe a different scenario. Let's talk about then the direct reference to Sean Longstaff, because we all know Eddie Howe very rarely pinpoints an individual player. You've mentioned before in this podcast, if he's asked about one player, he'll often go in the position in general. We've got X, Y, Z in that position. They're all brilliant, but he's specifically pinpointing Sean Longstaff. Why?
I mean, he did pinpoint Sean Longstaff, but he also did make sure he mentioned Bruno, even though the question was only about Longstaff and Willock. But I think
he went quite strongly, didn't he, on Sean Longstaff?
And I think the manner of his answer was actually to say that maybe it was aimed at us journalists, maybe it was aimed at the fans a bit, just to sort of give the reminder that Sean Longstaff does go under the radar on this team. He's not flashy, he does the simple stuff and he really grafts. And I think Eddie Howe is right in what he says, that actually he probably doesn't get the praise he deserves. If anybody's listening to this podcast, and I'm not trying to blow my own horn here, I've backed Sean Longstaff for a while. I think he's been absolutely fantastic this season. He's probably in the conversation for player of the season for me, but he probably won't be given it because, as I say, he just sort of flies under the radar a bit. But his energy, what he brings, I thought yesterday he was absolutely fantastic from minute one. And look, that was a big call. If you'd have asked Newcastle fans on Friday, who does Joelinton come in for? I think 80% of them would have said Sean Longstaff. Big call to keep him in, and he justified that decision for me.
Did you say he's going to win? He would be in the shout for Player of the Year there.
I think for me, if he carries on playing the way he's been playing, he'd be in the conversation of Player of the Season.
Intriguing. Let us know in the comments if you're watching live what you think about that shout. Before we talk more about what Eddie Howe had to say, I'm just going to jump into the comments. We've got John here saying, from seemingly nowhere, we now have some strength and depth. Look at our bench yesterday. Graham says the options are only as good as performance, and credit to them all. The French players are stepping up. Joe says he still thinks Murphy is only a sub, but yes, it was great to see Miggy smiling. We've got Steven saying Trips was great, made Rashford look like he wasn't playing. And yeah, I mean, everyone just seems really, really happy. And of course, Sam Mulliner is back from Newcastle Fans TV. Hi, lads, long-time viewer, first-time commenter, not maybe what I'd call you. I see your lad McTominay had a blinder yesterday. Aaron?
Yeah, look, I'm dreading waking up tomorrow morning knowing that my episode in Newcastle Fans TV is going to come out where I said that he was, better than Longstaff. But look, I'll still stand by that he's a good player. He had an absolute stinker yesterday, but yeah, Longstaff's definitely redeemed himself. He's definitely been listening to the pod.
I hope so. Hope you're subscribing, Sean. Johnny says Longstaff's game has improved a lot. His defensive work and position is getting much better, and he's getting some really good positions going forward. And actually, I think we're seeing that with Joe Willock as well. That's what was lacking. With Bruno, it was just there. But what we're now seeing is Joe Willock and Sean Longstaff both making late runs into the box, and they just need to really take their chances, which is something that's really been lacking. Obviously, Joe had a few chances yesterday, but I think it was his first Premier League goal since November, if I'm not mistaken, against Chelsea, I think. So
yeah, that screamer, yeah.
That's a long time. That's a long time not to be scoring goals. And someone here has just made the comment here. It's Sean saying, I just wish Longstaff and Willock could score more goals. They're brilliant getting in the right areas, but if they can score more, they'll be in the conversation for an England call-up. And I think that's what it is. I've just done a player rating video. It's over on our YouTube channel. And I think I give Longstaff a 7 or an 8. I think I've given him an 8, and I would have given him a 9. But bigger picture, it's a bit like Maxi. We need to see that week in, week out. And it's easy for me to sit here and say that. But, it seems that once every 4 or 5 games, he'll have a really good game and then he'll drop a level. I don't think the last few games he's played all that well. But, against Man United, brilliant. Can we see that on a more consistent basis is the only question. Because if we can, then the question over the likes of McTominay, maybe James Ward-Prowse, on so, at the front of the mind.
Yeah, look, I think the next couple of weeks is really important for him. I think knowing that Newcastle are going to go out and sign a centre midfielder in the summer, there's a lot of pressure now on him to, make sure he keeps his place. He started off brilliantly by keeping Joe Linton out yesterday and justifying the decision by how. For me, I just think he just offers the perfect balance to Bruno and Willock, who are these, clever, intricate players. Yes, the graft, but I think Longstaff, really, really complements being alongside them. They're both getting in really, really good positions. Longstaff especially, not so much yesterday, where it was more Willock yesterday, but they need to start scoring more. Especially Willock, given that he's sort of a more attacking player. I think if Willock starts adding goals to his game, he's got to be in the conversation to get in the English squad.
Yeah, fingers crossed he continues to perform well. Lewis says, a Geordie here in Australia, and it was definitely worth waking up at 3 a.m. for. Good effort there. Good effort. Christopher says, Bruno makes Longstaff and Willock better players, and I suppose over time we will see that, won't we? For all we were saying McTominay comes in to maybe replace Longstaff, I don't think we were saying Longstaff leaves the club. It's all about squad depth. So there we have it. What else was Eddie Howe saying? He was talking about confidence and ability. I mean, the win obviously gets Newcastle 3 points. It gets Newcastle above Manchester United, but the win did not only beat a direct rival, and what that does in terms of deflating Manchester United, but the message it sends out to Spurs tonight against Everton, to Liverpool, who are having a time of it, to Brighton, to Brentford, to those teams in the chasing pack. Newcastle United, they're here to stay and they mean business.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you sort of zoom out from yesterday as well, what they're doing against the big teams, they're taking 4 points off Manchester United. They've beaten Spurs away. They've beaten Chelsea. They should have got something at Liverpool away. They're proving that they can mix with anybody in this top 4 race. And I think you've mentioned it there. I think the deflating aspect of what it's done to Manchester United, who are still fighting on 3 fronts with the FA Cup and the Europa League, a squad that's looking tired. And they've got into that away dressing room at full time and had a full-blown inquest with the players while Newcastle United are celebrating. Huge mentally, not just leapfrogging them in the league, but actually getting one up on them mentally. Newcastle now, I mean, the top 4 race is firmly in their hands now. It's theirs to lose, really, sitting in 3rd place.
And Eddie Howe also mentioned, as you did there, kind of about the options, and he's got good players. I mean, it's just key, isn't it? And the feel good factor on the training ground, today, tomorrow, going in ahead of West Ham. I'm not sure what the schedule is, but I mean, it just seems like it will be, or it is, an amazing place to work.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there was always that worry, wasn't that the national break came at a really bad time again? They'd just beaten, 2 teams in a row. Was it going to sort of stop them in their tracks? It hasn't. And actually, this really busy run of games is probably coming at a good time. You'd fancy them to go and get something at West Ham on Wednesday, given the form they've been in. Brentford's a bit more tricky, probably, but I mean, they could realistically have Europa League or Europa Conference League qualification sewn up by the end of April if they keep going like this.
Absolutely amazing. John says, big shout out to us 2 centre halves, Botman and Cher, were brilliant and didn't give up. Man United, I didn't give Man United sniff and give us a platform to go on.
I'm worried about Fabian Cher though. I feel like every week he's getting a head injury.
It's ridiculous.
It's
isn't
ridiculous,
it?
isn't it?
Absolutely ridiculous.
It's got to the point now where a player goes down and you can't really see who it is. You think, oh, well, it'll be Shea. It's probably going to be Shea holding his head.
Yeah, I said that yesterday when he went down. I think he went down twice, didn't he?
He's going to have like a boxer's brain by the time he
Yeah, I mean, on a serious, it makes Alan Shearer's point about having concussion substitutes all the more necessary because he doesn't half get some blows to the head. But absolutely fantastic. And yesterday, someone turned to me. Not the chance that Shea had later on. It was kind of midway through the second half, though, and he drives through and he takes a shot, and I think just goes in the side net, not just wide. And someone turned to me and said, "I don't understand why opposition players let Fabian Shea do that, because every single season he will score an absolute worldie from 30 yards because he can hit a ball, he can pass a ball, and still opposition players just back off him."
He's already done it this season, hasn't he? Was at Forest at home early doors where he scored that sort of carbon copy of the Burnley goal. Look, I mean, he could have had 1 or 2 goals yesterday. Obviously, he hit the post from that header. He was really, really good yesterday. Botman, for me, was really good, and I think so much praise has been given to Bruno and Maxi and Willock for the goal. But actually, if you go back and rewind a bit, Man United try and counter attack, and Botman does this perfectly timed tackle from behind that restarts the attack. I thought the full-back four were brilliant yesterday, but Botman for me was fantastic.
Well, on Willock's goal, I think Isak deserves so much praise because he chases the ball down, he forces a throw in, Man United panic and kick it out, and then it kind of goes back and forth, doesn't it? And I think is it Willock or tries to chip it over,
and he gets in front of Varane.
The touch to bring that down, because that is a lost ball. That ball, that's the end of that move. Really, it should be. He brings it down, perfect touch, and he's only got one thing in his mind: picks out Bruno, and the rest is history. Honestly, that moment he brings it down, you can just see he's just a different class of player.
Yeah, and look, it's not just his goal scoring; he's proven that he can actually really link the play up really well. And I mean, we've already seen him play as a 10 earlier in the season, and I actually think that role would really suit him. I know he's doing really well as a striker as well. We've got so many options with him. He's big, but he's skinny, but he's somehow strong.
He's deceptive.
He's a really, really unique player. And I tweeted about it last night. I think he's starting to look like a bit of a steal at 58 million, if I'm being completely honest. He looks like a bargain at this rate.
He looks so absolutely fantastic. And I think what's really interesting, I mean, I suppose the game against West Ham's a little bit different because of the quick turnaround. But if it was yesterday and then Saturday or Sunday, even though Wilson scored, I don't necessarily think he'd be a cert to come back in, because Isak played really well. 8 or 9 out of 10 I would have given him, or I have given him in the player ratings. All he didn't do was score. But without him, Newcastle probably wouldn't have won that game, I don't think. And, that is just music to Eddie Howe's ears. He's got 2 strikers. Big moment for Callum Wilson to get a goal. He's really needed that.
Glad he got a goal yesterday, especially coming off the bench. I think that'll do his confidence a world of good. I thought he looked good coming on. But again, I think you can't drop Isak in this form, can you? But that's the beauty. Like I say, they've now got options for a change.
Should we listen to Erik ten Hag? He wasn't very happy.
Go on then.
Here's Erik ten Hag speaking to reporters after the game.
I was surprised that we could match the determination and the passion of the side of the opponent. And I think before, when you travel to St. James Park, to Newcastle, what will be going on, and especially after we win the cup. And so if you want to win big games, you have to be mature, and I didn't see that today on the pitch.
Why do you think that was? Do you think the players underestimated Newcastle and how much this game might mean to them?
No, I don't think they underestimate Newcastle. I think they play above their levels because they want so eager. But you could expect it if I said, they lose a big game against us, and of course they were determined to win this game. But then you have to match that, and you have to be aware of that situation from the start. And we didn't. We didn't enter too many times the final third. We didn't enter too many times the box from the opponent, and they could easily come into our box. But what we did well was blocking shots for the chances they create. But I think we have to do it much better.
Laurie.
Eric, 3 Premier League games without a goal now. Is that a concern? And what can we do to remedy it?
Yeah, look, I always have to laugh about such questions because that is you bringing up a story, but we score in many other games. We do score, we create. Today definitely we didn't, but also in the games where you now refer to 2 games before where we did create chances. Today we didn't create too many chances, but I know this team has the quality to score goals. Today that was not a good day for us.
I'm just wondering if Aaron or one of our listeners can look up the definition of rattled in the dictionary, because I'm pretty sure it would read Erik ten Hag after Newcastle United beat Manchester United 2-0. I mean, he's absolutely rattled there. I mean, the point about losing the final and wanting revenge, I know it was spoken about a lot in the build-up, but I'm not really sure that it applies because that's gone now. It's gone. You know, beating Manchester United yesterday is not going to bring that final back. I don't really buy about the whole revenge. I think, you know, the focus had to be on beating Manchester United because of the race for the top 4. So I'm not buying that. And you can just see, you know, as his team were outplayed, they were dominated by just a better Newcastle United side. And his demeanor there, we were talking about the bigger picture, about how this impacts the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's got to nip that in the bud, hasn't he? Because if he's ganning about like that the next few weeks, you know, plays in Newcastle's hands easily.
Yeah, 100%. And Eddie Howe actually, you know, what you've just said, Eddie Howe pretty much agree with yesterday. He was asked, you know, was it about revenge? Was it about making sure you're right at the rounds of the cup final? And Eddie Howe actually said, no, you know, we haven't really been thought about it. It wasn't mentioned this week. The only thing on our mind was making sure we got 3 points in the Premier League. And I think that's the way to look at it. Yes, from a fan perspective, you wanted to get payback, but actually it was more about, you know, the race for the Champions League. Is it karma that he's rattled? I think the comments this week were so unnecessary from Ten Hag to accuse Newcastle of this constant time waste. When actually yesterday, from minute 1, David De Gea, it was so
strange.
It felt to me, and look, I don't know if this is true. It felt like Ten Hag was sort of getting Man United to do it for like a comedic effect. Do you know what I mean? But
what do you gain from it?
But and then obviously when Nick Pope got a warning, I don't know why he got a warning when he wasn't even time wasting, and it sort of spilled out on the bench. It just felt like such an unnecessary thing. And obviously we don't have the clip, but Eddie Howe yesterday was really. He wasn't angry, but after the game, Kieran Kelly asked him about the time wasting comments, and Eddie Howe said, "I'm really glad you brought that up because it's absolute nonsense. We want the ball in play. We want to play a high tempo. We do not want to kill the game." And they showed yesterday they didn't. Not at 0-0, not at 1-0, not even at 2-0. They wanted it more. And I do think Ten Hag's comments this week were just absolute rubbish.
Yeah, I just don't get why you were time wasting with it was like literally six minutes on the clock. It was so bizarre. And was it to get the crowd rattled up? I mean,
which
then
it did work, to be fair. But
that doesn't work in Man United's favour, does it?
But they were a lot more lively.
And then when the referee, like you say, spoke to Nick Pope, it was just like, what on earth are you doing? I mean,
bizarre.
The referee, I have to say, and I don't like, you know, having a go at refs, but I didn't think he had the best game. I mean, there were no bookings in the game.
I actually think he managed that really well.
If
I'm honest.
I mean, there were a few instances, and I think he set his stall out quite early on. There was a moment when Anthony goes down under a challenge from Dan Burn. It wasn't a challenge, and he gives a foul. So it wasn't a foul, and he gives it. And then 2 minutes later, the same kind of challenge on Maximum, it wasn't a foul, and he gives it. And it's like you've set your stall out now. Any single touch and a player goes down, you're going to have to give free kicks. I just felt it wasn't the best performance. And that comment to Nick Pope about time wasting, absolutely ludicrous. But yeah, I mean, talking about touchline antics, I mean, we don't usually see Eddie Howe getting all that animated, so he must have clearly been up a height about it.
Oh, how usually it's Tyndall doing the sort of, you know, the heavy lifting on the touchline, but actually, as soon as Ten Hag said that he thought the Nick Pope thing was justified, Howe was over like a shot. And who would have thought it would have been Steve McLaren having to play peacemaker on the touchline after all these years? But yeah, Howe was really, really pleased somebody brought it up in the presser because he wanted to make it clear that he thought it was just ludicrous what Ten Hag would say.
And Jacob Murphy making it home with a little tap of his wrist as he walked down the tunnel.
And you know what it is? We spoke about this when he did it at Southampton. That's the time to do it. You've just started for Newcastle United in a 2-0 win. You've played really well. That's when you do it. Not in the semi-final of a Carabao Cup game where it could come back to haunt you. But yeah, I thought, that was a very nice touch.
I just love Jacob Murphy. He's just living. And I know you got Dan Burn. I know you've got Sean Longstaff, Newcastle fans, but obviously Murphy is a Newcastle United fan. And maybe it's a bad thing. I don't know the way like he's clearly wearing his heart on his sleeve, but he's just living his best life, isn't he?
Oh, 100%.
He is just living his best
dream.
life. Absolutely brilliant. And a lot of people have been a big fan of Jason Tyndall as well for his reaction when Anthony was wasn't sure whether he needed to get treatment on the pitch or off the pitch. I think it was a challenge from Dan Burn, wasn't it? And he gets a bit winded.
Yeah, and he was sort of rolling on the pitch and off the pitch. Tyndall just stood there going, "What are you doing?"
Again, it is a very good partnership, Tyndall and Eddie Howe. Now I've got Luke Shaw's comments, because Luke Shaw, again, some oddly bizarre comments from the Manchester United camp, and I get it. They're trying to deflect from what an awful performance it was, but let me read them out, and then I'll get your take on them. So Shaw said, "Not good enough. I feel like every time I speak after bad results, I'm always honest, and I think us as a team have to be honest. I do think Newcastle are a very good side, but I don't think they won the game on quality. I think they won it on passion, hunger, desire, attitude. They clearly had a higher motivation than we do, and that can't be possible." I'm not going to read the rest of it because I don't care what else he has to say. But on that, that's a little bit insulting, isn't it? 22 shots and goal from Newcastle to Manchester United 6. Didn't have a shot on target in the first half. Thoroughly outplayed from back to front. I mean, what is he on about? No quality?
Yeah, I thought it was baffling. I think when a Man United teams came to St James's Park and played with that little quality, and Newcastle have played so well, I think it was just baffling. I know what you mean, he's trying to deflect. And his point was that they wanted it more and they just were a bit more eager. Well, they were more eager, but they were also much, much better. They were playing much better football. They defended much better. And also, Luke Shaw was probably at fault for both goals.
Yeah, he didn't have a good game at all.
Yeah, just absolutely stupid from him.
He says that and he goes back in the dressing room. Everyone's like, "Well, to be fair, Luke,
Also,
I mean, it was a little bit your fault. You got to take responsibility for that, lad." But yeah, I mean, obviously, probably making them substitutions didn't help for the Callum Wilson goal. But one thing that I think was notable as well, and someone might come back with me. I haven't checked the stats, so if I'm wrong, come back at us if you like. But the ball seemed to be going into the box a lot more against Manchester United than in recent weeks.
Yeah, look, first half, Trippier and Murphy, trying to get as many crosses in. Obviously, Willock and Isak nearly scored from it. Maxi down the other wing was doing it. Fabian Schär had more touches in the opposition box than Marcus Rashford, which just goes to show you sort of how many attacking chances Newcastle had. So yeah, it was a really direct performance. And look, I think that's what Murphy and Maxi have been given the last couple of weeks, which is what we want to see.
And Murphy's, he's got one thing in mind when he gets down that flank, and it's put the ball in the box. Great to see Trippier as well getting the ball in the box. His set piece delivery has been much better over recent weeks. It was a little bit poor leading up to the final, I felt. But in recent weeks, the last 3 games, it's been much better. Newcastle need that off him. We said, didn't we, a few weeks back, if Newcastle are going to qualify for Champions League football, they need Kieran Trippier to rediscover the form of the early part of the season. Yesterday was a brilliant starting point.
Yeah, definitely. And, I mentioned Dan Burn earlier, and there was obviously calls for him to be dropped out of the team. There was never going to be such calls for Trippier, but it had been noticed by a lot of fans that, along with Callum Wilson, he was probably suffering a bit since the World Cup. I think the last couple of games, he's been so much better. I think from Wolves onwards, we've seen sort of the old Trippier back.
Roger says Trips was back on fire. Great crosses. Let's talk about St James's Park, because we often talk about the crowd and the atmosphere, and of course, we're a little bit biased on this podcast. But yesterday, when we've seen some great atmospheres, we've felt it, this season. But yesterday was something else. From the word go, the moment them Surfer flags came up, the first throw-in was cheered. Dan Burn getting the first challenge was cheered. It just felt different. And Man United, I think we're absolutely rattled from the word go.
Yeah, I might go as far as saying it was maybe the best atmosphere of the season. It was certainly up there. And as I said earlier, I'm usually the most confident person when it comes to Newcastle. I think they're going to beat anybody. But because everyone was so confident this week, I thought I maybe need to, temper my expectations. But as soon as I got in the ground, the stadium started filling up. The pre-match displays at both ends. I thought, you know what, actually, yeah, I think they could do it. It was really, really good. And I know we say it a lot, and it's such a cliche, but they were the 12th man.
I just think when you're like, you're an opposition player and you're seeing a throne being cheered, you must just take a step back and just go, what the hell have we walked into here?
Yeah, look, it's not always like that, but when Newcastle fans get it right like that and they're really in the mood on a sunny afternoon like that, it was very, very similar to, that Arsenal game last season on the night where the game was sort of won really before kickoff because you could tell that Arsenal just did not want to be inside that atmosphere. And it was a similar yesterday. De Gea, as we say, and those antics probably played into that because fans were fired up and there wasn't this little lull in the first half. But yeah, really, really good. I really enjoyed it.
It was fantastic. And as well, Isaac and Bruno are two men who know exactly how to harness that. You can just see them every single week, just arms in the air, wanting Newcastle fans to get on the journey with. Not that they need any encouragement, but really important that they've got not just them two, but those two I'm especially going to mention now, just who know how to use it.
Yeah, and that's what I really love about Isaac is when he chases down a ball that's going nowhere, and he gets the corner and he pumps his arms up and everyone reacts. It's just brilliant. And also Bruno, God love him. If you hadn't have watched the match and you'd just seen the photos after the game and you looked at that Willock celebration, you would have thought Bruno had scored it because he's literally roaring into the crowd when everyone else is hugging each other.
I kind of want to go around with him in the supermarket when he finds his favourite pudding and he gans at the fridge. He's like, come on. Do you know what I mean? I hope he's like that every time. He gans down the newsagents and he gets his favourite copy of the Chronicle and he's... Because it's infectious. You just get taken away with it, don't you?
Imagine if Newcastle ever win anything. I think he's gonna combust. Honestly, he's just amazing.
I mean, when I walked back down into the area yesterday from my seat, one Man United fan I heard saying, it was intimidating. I've been to stadiums. He said 90,000 seater stadiums, and I have seen nothing like that. You do not want to come and play here. That's the message that's getting around.
Yeah, I think that recently, especially this season, I think war flags have stepped it up. The atmosphere has been so much better. There's so much demand for tickets now, and I mean, yesterday, just looking around the stadium, Man United fans must have been up the top thinking, "What the hell? You don't see this at Old Trafford," and it just plays such a difference. And also, I know we say it a lot, but opposition players must come to Newcastle and think, I would love to play here. I would love to be.
It's a great advert, isn't it?
It's such a great advert, and we say it a lot on this pod. But I just want to say it again. War flags do such a good job at making the atmosphere before a game so special. It's such a good advert for the club.
Just on Manchester United, because obviously Newcastle, you would chasing or trying to keep them from third spot. But yesterday, did you see anything from Manchester United? I know, they haven't got Casemiro. That kind of worries you because, for many, we did the podcast earlier in the week where we didn't even speak about Manchester United in the race for the top four. Mm-hmm. And we made that editorial decision just to get a Spurs, a Brighton, and a Liverpool man on the pod. Mm-hmm. We had a clip from the Manchester United reporter just to get his insight, 2-minute clip. The rest of the show was like an hour long. I mean, clearly they are now in the race to be still in the top four. But I sat there yesterday and thought, if teams press them, they're gonna get the better of them. And De Gea does not look comfortable having to have the ball at his feet. And it was really strange that they didn't try and change it up because it just played in Newcastle's hands.
Yeah, I think it was really weird. There was obviously a Sky Sports poll before the game, and it was asking fans how likely are this team to finish in the top four. And Man United was like 93%. And I was thinking, well, yes, they're third. They're doing really well. But, I mean, you look at that team. Without Casemiro, they just look so different. Even without Fred, dare I say it. Fred, I think yesterday was probably the man to start. Rashford can go missing for, the majority of the game. They're starting Wout Weghorst up front, 19 games in a row. I think he had 4 passes yesterday. You look at that team, actually, and there's a lot of holes to pick out of it. Add on top of it, as I said, the mental factor of losing yesterday, losing third spot at Newcastle, I don't think you need to be as worried as we were about Man United. Add in the fact they've still got an FA Cup and a Europa League run. As I said earlier, it's very much in Newcastle's hands.
What you say? Some of their defenders are good to be annoyingly fair. Yeah,
I think
but they couldn't stop Isaac
on their
or Wilson.
day. Varane and Martinez and even Luke Shaw, really, really good. But yesterday, I thought just none of them right. As you say, Isaac had the measure.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. But I guess, as we're talking about their weaknesses, Eddie Howe will just be focusing on Newcastle United. Big game against West Ham coming up.
Yeah, that'll be the focus. And, obviously the Sky cameras were in the dressing room after the game, and Eddie Howe would be heard saying, be professional. We've got West Ham on Wednesday. I think that was code for do not go and party on the quayside tonight. Jacob Murphy, I'm looking at you. Very much. They've got a huge week. I mean, all that good work that they did on Sunday can be undone if they don't beat West Ham and Brentford. So, I mean, for Howe, it's just, as you say, he didn't want to talk about the Champions League at all in that post-match presser. And we tried to get it out of him, but he just takes it one game at a time.
Do you think it's mentioned away from the cameras?
You know what it is? I actually don't think Eddie Howe's lying to us when he says he just take a day at a time. I'm sure that the players are talking about it and dreaming about it, but Eddie Howe just wants focus. And it was like the Carabao Cup final. They got the final and they had 4 games, and Eddie Howe was like, we're not talking about it. We need to focus on these 4 Premier League games. And I think it'll be a similar thing now of knowing that you're 1 game away from actually, being back to square one with it.
Big game tonight, Spurs versus Everton. Obviously, in terms of who might go down, but obviously more for Newcastle and the race for the top 4. How is that one going to go?
I think if the Everton that turned up against Chelsea last week turned up again, they could probably turn Spurs over. It's very, very interesting to see how they're going to react now. They don't have that very, very negative of presence of Conte weighing them down. Look, if Everton can get a result tonight, perfect weekend for Newcastle.
And I'm going to ask you about the club's finances. Obviously, the accounts came out a few days back. I just want to quickly get your take on the managerial switches that have happened during the game yesterday or just before. So obviously Brendan Rodgers goes, then Graham Potter goes. What have you made of it? Could we see Rafa Benitez back in the dugout sometime soon, do you think?
You know what it is? Rafa's been searching for a Prem job for so long, and it just feels like the 2 clubs that are perfect for him are Leicester or West Ham. And I think he might finally have his chance. It would be, very typical if Potter goes and gets it about 6 hours after Rodgers was sacked. But yeah, Potter, I mean, it was never going to work. Chelsea looked absolutely awful when they came to St James's Park. Interesting to see who's going to take them over and, come to St James's Park.
You wouldn't go anywhere near it, would you?
You wouldn't touch it with a barge pole, not after, what they've done the last year. Very, very good, talented squad, but just such a mismatch. And that owner, you're not going to have any say.
I tell you what, right? You look at the way Chelsea have done things, the way they've spent money, who they've spent. Is the manager actually getting a say? And if he is getting a say, how big of a say compared to how Newcastle go about things? I mean, it just reaffirms what a good job the owners, the scouting team have done. Everyone working together in cohesion. If there's a playbook on how not to run a club, you could argue Chelsea are it. If there's a playbook on how to spend a little bit of money, you could argue Newcastle is definitely it.
Yeah, look, and I think the proof's in the pudding. 13 managers have left Prem clubs this season, and Newcastle have just gone from strength to strength. And I think, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I think when Eddie Howe first got the job, there was lots of talk, well, why didn't they go for Gerrard or why didn't they go for Emery? Perfect decision by the owners.
Be interesting to see, because I also reckon that even though David Moyes got a win for West Ham, with all these, Potter flying about, could David Moyes get the boot and West Ham make a move?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I was speaking to a West Ham mate of mine the other day, and he says the football's been abject. They love Moyes for what they did in terms of getting them to the Europa League, but it's time to go. And even though they won yesterday, I don't think they were very good. And as you say, there's now managers that can go and take them. Rodgers, Potter, Nagelsmann, even Benitez. There's options there for teams like West Ham.
I guess with the way Chelsea are, it makes it even more important in the way Liverpool are as well, and Spurs to an extent. These 3 big teams aren't going to be quiet next season, the season
No.
after. We know Chelsea are going to spend a lot of money. We imagine the other two teams will, Man United will strengthen. So Newcastle United, despite how far ahead of schedule they are, they really need to make a count this season, don't they?
I was saying the exact thing to our colleague Kieran Kelly yesterday, that actually they've had no European football this season, no distractions, and also you're probably never going to get a season like this where Liverpool and Chelsea and to a degree Spurs falter so much. You've hit the nail on the head. They're all going to spend this summer. Villa will spend. Brighton are already pretty much fighting up there anyway. Everton are going to be hopefully back next season if Dyche can keep them up. So that's why it's so important to make a count and reach the top four.
Someone's just mentioned there about players at Chelsea having massive egos, and we spoke about this several times, haven't we? About when that kind of balance comes towards Newcastle. Is that playing a factor at the moment where it seems everyone in that dressing room at Newcastle, egos doesn't seem to be a thing, and if they are, they're in check?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Eddie Howe wanted last summer. He didn't want anybody to come in and one, shatter the wage structure, but two, actually come in and think that they're bigger than the club. They needed the right character. And I think what we've seen, this season, you look at that team, and I was watching them celebrate yesterday. I thought, I just love this group of lads. All great lads, no egos, as you say.
Everyone got their back.
Everybody's got each other's backs. They really do love the club. They're loving the journey. They clearly love and respect Eddie Howe. It feels like it's too good. Is it too good? Is it too good to be true?
Do you know what? You kind of had that moment yesterday that Newcastle United of old, you're nervous, you're on the edge of your seat thinking 1-0, Man United are going to win this 3-1. Yesterday, the only time I kind of had that was at half time when you're thinking, let's say they're going to get 10 off at half time, they're going to come out. But after 5 minutes of the second half, any fear I had kind of just disappeared. And I never then felt worried that Newcastle United were going to lose the game when they go 1-0 up. I never felt they were going to allow Man United back into it. And I think maybe we're past the stage where, at least for me as a fan, I'm thinking about the old Newcastle. Oh, it's typical old Newcastle, And this is what Newcastle is now. You say it's too good to be true, but this is the truth. This is what Newcastle United are.
Yeah,
they're a good, solid Premier League side, up there out of merit, effort, commitment, and they're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, and I think results like yesterday and getting points at City, beating Spurs, getting points off Arsenal, it's going to do them such confidence, not just for this season, but actually, going forward before they've even started to strengthen.
Ramesh asks, do you think Newcastle can keep the intensity, high pressure up against West Ham in such a short space of time?
Yeah, I think they can. I think yesterday probably took a lot out of them. I think they all pretty much came through unscathed, other than Willock, who went down. They're not too sure if it's a hamstring issue, whether it's cramp. They've had that that one where they're tripping to Dubai. They all looked refreshed. Eddie Howe keeps stressing that he thinks it was a really good trip in terms of their training. I think they should be fine on Wednesday.
Fingers crossed, and we're bringing you live coverage of that through our dedicated live blog. Just to finish off then, Aaron, the financial accounts came out on Friday. Just explain to us what was in them and what you made of it.
Yeah, so these accounts were from July 2021 to June 2022. So obviously 9 months of the takeover included. It was a £70 million loss for the club, which obviously on the face of it looks very, very bad. But actually, a lot of that was down to their very vast spending in the January market, and also the improvements that they've made around the club. Their turnover was up, which is good. Their match day and their media income was also up, partly due to the fact that it was COVID the year before. But next year and next season, they've been on TV every week, so they'll get a lot of Sky money. Finishing third, obviously, will go a long way as well. So yeah, on the surface, £70 million loss looked bad, but actually, Darren Eales has even came out after the accounts and said they're going to continue spending, which is obviously a positive sign. What
do you think it means going forward? Obviously, a lot of questions about sponsorship. The sponsorship is going to be huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
To build on the success they've had so far.
Yeah, the one thing is clear is that even though the first year the Castore deal did quite well financially, they need more sponsorships. They need bigger revenue streams than what they've got at the moment. But look, this is why Peter Silverson's been brought in. You know, this is what Darren Eales is going to try and do in the coming months. So yeah, they're in really good hands, and it's good to see that, you know, the club are in sort of investment mode. They're going to keep spending, which is obviously good to see.
Fantastic stuff. You can read all Aaron's reports on that over on chroniclelive.co.uk. This has been the Monday Show on the Everything is Black and White podcast. If you're watching live on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Plenty of Newcastle United content coming your way. And if you're listening on the podcast, thank you very much for doing so. We appreciate your support. Hit that like button if you haven't already, and leave us a rating and review with some kind words. We do appreciate it. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news, and enjoy the rest of your week.